back, everybody, to another episode where we are going to dive deep into egg donation and the egg donation process. So I'm super excited to have you all here. As a reminder, if you have not already subscribed to our YouTube channel, please make sure to subscribe so that you know when we put out another video for all of you. And today I am joined with Dion once again. You've seen her in some of our previous videos, or hopefully you have seen her in our previous videos that we've done before. And we've got a great topic. This is something that you don't think about often. And today we're going to be talking about the 11 things that no one tells you when you are thinking about using an egg donor. So we're going to tell you today what these 11 things are. And I think these are going to really help you throughout the process and allow you to make your decisions a little bit smoother and easier. So thanks so much for joining, Dion.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much, Mark.
Yeah, let's dive in. So, this part, so I should tell everybody, we came up with these 11 points. Like, we wrote down these 11 tips because we think these are the most important for all of you. I normally don't start with this sort of thing because I'm a happy, the glass is half full person. But, this is actually potentially the most important piece of what we're talking about. And grieving, like, when you make the choice to go through and use egg donor when you were hoping to conceive, with your own eggs, you have to give yourself some time to grieve through that process. Isn't that right?
Yeah, absolutely, Mark. And it's such an important point to bring up and not to gloss over. And I like that you're bringing it up first, as it is the transition period, as couples are going from trying on their own with their own eggs to realizing that, there's only going to be that biological connection on the male side, no longer on the female side. And it is really important to acknowledge and take that time to grieve as you're moving into the next steps, so that then you can be excited as you get into that, by allowing yourself some time to move from the one stage to another.
Yeah, absolutely. The grieving process can vary from individual and couple to couple. So for some, it might just be a week or a month, and for some, it might be a couple of months. And that's okay when you're using an egg donor, because time is not compressing on you when you're using an egg donor. So you have a little bit more flexibility with that as well. On the biological point, though, that you mentioned for everyone watching, yes, it's not your biological egg, but you are passing on some of your biological material during the gestational period of pregnancy where you're carrying the individual. And hopefully that makes making that decision a little bit easier for everyone as well.
Yeah, that's a great point as well, Mark. And you're absolutely right. It does vary from couples to couples. I've seen some need much more time, but like you said, they don't have to be in as big of a hurry. So that's always exciting. Yeah,
that's good. So point number 2 is that we have options. Like, when we're thinking about egg donor, we just think, oh, well, there's just egg donor. It's just one thing. I'm just making the decision. I'm saying yes to egg donor. Let's make it happen. But there's really multiple options that couples need to make when they make the decision to use an egg donor. Isn't that right?
Yes, absolutely. And it's, so once they've come to that decision, they have many more decisions to make, which is wonderful because there are a lot of options available.
Yeah, we didn't even think that there were. So let's review some of these options. So I think everyone watching, when they think of egg donor and they're just making the decision, yes, I'm going to use an egg donor, they just think, okay, well, I think there's 2 scenarios. They think either someone just donated an egg for them to use, or that they have to find an individual who's willing to give their egg for them to use, right? And those are factual. Those are both true, but there's details in between.
Right.
Yeah. Can you help us with that?
Yeah. I mean, as you said, there are many options. So there's the frozen egg banks where there are many frozen eggs, and they would still be choosing the donor, but it would be from the pool of donors who already have eggs that are frozen from other cycles. So that can be much, much faster process for them, and typically a little more inexpensive.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah. Where then with the fresh, there's also more options. They have the fresh where they can choose their donor out of a database, fresh donor database, and then from that, there's even more options, because from the fresh, they can either do a split cycle or a full cycle. Here at YourEggs, where they're able to, split the cost, and as well as they would be splitting the number of eggs that result from the cycle.
So the split cycle is they're sharing that donor
Yes.
essentially with another couple,
Yes.
and so they defer the costs and they split the
Yes.
amount of eggs that were retrieved.
Yes.
Got it.
Exactly.
And then if they just want to work with that donor on their own, they can do a fresh cycle with that person on their own.
Yes. Yes. Exactly. So as you said, many different options to consider once they make that choice.
Yeah, and this is a perfect segue into tip number 3, which is selecting the right egg donor takes time. And so I think it takes time on multiple fronts, one of which is just the process can be quick depending on the paths we just talked about,
Yes.
or it can take a long time if we have to pick the right individual with the right characteristics and we want it to be a fresh process. But it's
Yes.
also, it can take time for couples to decide what they want, right?
For sure. And especially because as a couple, so you have two people who both have priorities and characteristics that are important to them. So definitely it's important for them to take the time to write down what's priority for them and then to come to agreement as they're searching for donors to what's most important to them. And this can be a lengthy process and one that couples do not want to rush through.
Yeah, absolutely. They should. This is the place for them to take their time to decide, like how tall and how big and hair color and eye color and what religious background did they come from, what cultural background did they come from, all these sorts of things, right?
Yes, absolutely. And they will have all of this available to them, this information about the donors. Generally, it's all the physical characteristics that you talked about, in addition to hobbies, interests, education level.
Oh, awesome.
Yes.
That's great. So if they have all this information about a donor, do they get to know the donor? Do they get to meet the donor? Do they get to know who the donor is?
Yes, that's awesome, Mark. You just brought us to our fourth point.
That was my plan.
Anonymity is the choice on the part of the donor. So, and most donors generally will have they'll make their decision in advance, whether they want to be fully anonymous, and they'll have a contract with the lawyer set up. Sometimes, though, donors will be open to being known, if the intended parents are interested in that and the donor's open to it.
So I think for our viewers, something that's really important here is that as a couple, if you are using an egg donor, you don't get to choose if
Yes.
that donor is known or anonymous. It's the choice of the donor to make that decision. And I think
Exactly.
that's really important for us to hear, right?
Yeah, it's important to be aware of going into.
Okay, good. So I know that from my conversations with couples who have had to make this choice, they wanted to try to keep their biology as connected to this embryo, to this child as possible. So they've always looked for close relatives or family members,
Yes.
or maybe even friends that they know really well,
Yes.
to be part of that egg donation process, to be the one that donates the egg. So first and foremost, yes, it's possible for friends and family to donate their egg, but our tip here in number 5 is that just because you know them doesn't mean that they don't need to be screened and evaluated, correct?
Yes, exactly. It's still a very important part of the process for the donor to go through this screening. And we do, as you said, have many people who will choose to use a sister as their donor or a cousin, so they are known, and sometimes they are surprised, but we still do need to have all the genetic testing as well as the infectious disease testing done. So there is, some of that time involved in the process as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to add here that this is also a place where you will still have legal agreements, by the way, drafted with these individuals. So even though they're a close friend or a family member, all the same steps need to be covered for that individual, as even if it was a person you didn't know.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
Good. So now, number 6 is, for me, is that cost can be very different from a one egg donor cycle to another egg donor cycle. And I think everybody watching just assumes oh, it's just a flat rate. It's always the same amount every time, regardless of who you're using or where you go or what it is. But that's not necessarily true, is it?
No, absolutely. It can vary greatly, just as their choice of how to go about the cycle, whether it's going to be frozen or fresh, or they're going to split a fresh cycle. Just as those choices, then the costs vary greatly depending on what choice, couples decide to proceed forward with.
And so you had mentioned when we were talking about those different cycles that using a already frozen egg that was already donated previously is less expensive
Yes,
than,
generally.
than choosing an individual and starting from scratch, right?
Exactly. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's variety in that.
Yes, exactly. It allows people to match their budget, with their needs and help the two to meet.
Oh,
Yeah.
I love that. I love the way you put that together for them. Okay. So the next thing that can vary, point number 7, is time, right? Is the time to a transfer or even to a pregnancy, hopefully,
Yes.
can vary from donor cycle to donor cycle because of the differences in protocols, correct?
Yes, absolutely. Okay. And some of that goes along with a couple of the other points that if they are going with the frozen eggs, it's going to be much quicker, maybe perhaps 1 to 3 months, since the eggs are already available for them to be thawing and then fertilizing. Versus if they're going with a fresh donor, then it's going to take longer, generally maybe 3 to 6 months, and especially depends on the donor availability. Some of them may be in school and need to finish something before they can start, so it can definitely vary more greatly with a fresh cycle for the timing.
And it also could take time for the couple to decide who they want to use, right?
Absolutely. Yes. Okay. Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's good to plan for.
Absolutely. We have to plan for these things, especially as we're thinking, well, when we're going through the fertility process, we always want things to happen as quickly as possible. So planning helps with that, but also recognizing that some of those decisions will impact the amount of time that goes into it.
Yep, absolutely.
So tip number 8 is that when you go through the egg donation process, you should know in advance that you are going to be dealing with multiple individuals or agencies for that matter, right? Can you list some of the different individuals or agencies that someone might encounter?
Absolutely, and many people will be familiar with them. Some have already been to the fertility center, which is obviously going to be, one of the big places they're going to be interacting with. Some are already coming from them if they had already done some IVF cycles.
Yep.
And then there will also be the egg donation agency, and then there will be attorneys for them as well, and then sometimes some other medical practitioners involved as well.
Great. And medical practitioners, so it could be like psychologists. Okay.
Exactly.
Great.
Yes.
Great. Number 9, I think, is something that most people are not aware of. And this comes down to pregnancy success rates. So how different are pregnancy success rates when you're using an egg donor versus your own eggs?
Yeah, this is a really exciting one because when many people have maybe been trying on their own and had struggles or, advanced maternal age or having something like, POI or POF, and they're coming into it and they may have had multiple failed cycles when they come into donor, it's a very pleasant surprise to know that donor success rates are right around 85% pregnancy rate, which is very, very high compared to an average IVF cycle.
Yeah, especially for those 2 categories that you just mentioned, right? Premature ovarian insufficiency or premature ovarian failure.
Yes.
Those success rates are often below 5%.
Yeah.
So to swing from, let's say 5% to 85% is a huge, huge change.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's always really exciting to keep in mind.
So we can keep our hopes high when we're going through an egg donation cycle.
Yeah.
But that doesn't necessarily mean that cycles don't get canceled from time to time, right? And that's point number 10 for everybody watching.
Yeah, and of course it's much less common than an average IVF cycle, but it can happen in some instances. Okay. And that can be difficult.
And are there a couple examples that you can give us as to when those might happen?
Perhaps if the ovaries just aren't producing enough eggs in that particular cycle, so they want to wait.
For the donor?
Yes, exactly, for the donor. So they want to wait for a better cycle.
Okay. And then another scenario that I think of is you have the eggs, you've created your embryos, and you're ready for transfer, and maybe you as an intended parent, maybe your uterus isn't ready or your endometrial lining isn't ready and prepared, and so that could delay the cycle as well.
Yeah, it could delay. The embryos will still be there waiting, but they might have to wait for another cycle for the transfer.
Okay.
Exactly.
And then point number 11 for all of us, for all of you watching actually, is that if you as a couple want multiple children, is that something that they should think about now?
Absolutely. They want to
Okay.
think about that in advance because their donor may or may not be available in the future to donate again. She may be in another stage in her life and not wanting to donate again. So it's important to think about that in advance, especially if maybe they want to take the full cycle, if they know they're going to want multiple siblings, or if they're going the frozen egg donor route, they may want to purchase more frozen eggs.
As many as they can have
Yeah.
now for the future.
Yes, when they're available.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So to me, these 11 points are essential to understand if a couple is making the decision to go through an egg donor cycle. So hopefully all of you watching found it important as well. Now we want to hear from you. I want you to comment down below, and I want to hear a couple things. One, which one of these 11 points was most important for you, or did you find the most interesting? So let us know. And then what questions do you have about using an egg donor or going through egg donation that we can help support you with? So leave those comments down below as well. I'm going to thank Dion once again for joining me today. I really appreciate it. And I'm going to thank all of you for watching. If you like this video, make sure you give us a thumbs up. Again, if you're not a subscriber to the YouTube channel, please make sure to subscribe. And that way you'll get notified when we put out another video for all of you. And if you want more information on egg donation, on finding the right egg donor, then I encourage you to check out YourEggs at youreggs.com. We'll see you in the next video.